I never thought my own family would try to burn me alive for becoming a Christian. I am going to tell this exactly as it happened, without exaggeration, without drama, because what happened that day was already beyond anything I could invent. I am not telling this to impress anyone. I am telling this because I almost died, and because God intervened when there was no human way out. My name is Karim. I was raised Muslim in a small village where religion is not just belief, it is law, identity, and control. Everyone knows everyone. Families are not just families, they are systems. If one person steps out of line, everyone feels threatened. From a young age, I learned that obedience was survival. I did not grow up questioning anything. I prayed, I fasted, I followed rules. I never imagined leaving Islam. I never imagined becoming a Christian. That idea was not even allowed to exist in my mind. Where I come from, converting is not seen as a personal choice. It is seen as betrayal. Everything started quietly. I met a Christian man while working outside the village. He did not preach loudly. He did not argue. He just spoke calmly about forgiveness, about grace, about a God who wants relationship, not fear. At first I listened only to argue later, but his words stayed with me. I began reading secretly. I hid the Bible like it was a weapon. I read at night when everyone slept. I did not feel excitement. I felt conflict. I felt fear. But I also felt something I had never felt before, peace mixed with truth. It was not emotional. It was steady. I prayed alone, unsure if God was even listening. I asked for clarity. I asked for courage. Over time I knew. I could not deny it anymore. I believed in Jesus. I became a Christian quietly, because I knew what would happen if anyone found out. For a while, nothing happened. Life continued. I worked. I prayed. I kept my faith hidden. But something changed inside me. I stopped living in fear. I stopped hating myself. People noticed. They asked questions. I avoided answers. The breaking point came when my younger cousin asked me why I was different. He was struggling. He was tired of fear. I told him the truth. I told him about Jesus. I did not plan to evangelize. I just answered honestly. That honesty destroyed everything. Word spreads fast in a small village. Faster than fire, faster than reason. Within days, my name was being whispered. People watched me differently. Conversations stopped when I entered a room. My own relatives stopped greeting me. Then one night, several men came to my house. They did not knock. They entered like they owned my life. They asked one question. Are you a Christian? I did not answer immediately. Not because I was ashamed, but because I knew that whatever I said would decide if I lived or died. I thought of running. I thought of lying. I thought of my mother. I said yes. There was no shouting at first. That silence was worse. One man said I had committed apostasy. Another said I had polluted my family. Another said examples had to be made. They dragged me outside. Neighbors came out. No one stopped them. No one questioned it. Fear kept everyone still. They tied my hands. They accused me publicly. They said I was trying to convert others. They said I had shamed my bloodline. They did not give me time to explain. They did not want explanation. They wanted punishment. Someone suggested prison. Someone suggested exile. Then someone said fire. That word changed the air. Everyone understood what it meant. Fire means final. Fire means message. I was taken to an open area near the edge of the village. A wooden post was already there. That means they had thought about this before. Maybe not for me, but for someone like me. They tied me tightly. My arms hurt. My legs shook. I was not brave. I was terrified. I prayed silently, not for escape, just for strength. People gathered. Some watched with anger, some with curiosity, some with fear. I saw faces I grew up with, faces that once laughed with me. Now they watched me like I was already dead. Someone brought fuel. Someone lit it. At that moment, I thought this was the end. I thought of all the things I would never say. I thought of my mother finding out like this. I thought of whether God would forgive me for being afraid. I did not scream. I did not fight. I started to sing a simple Christian worship song. My voice was shaking. The words were not perfect, but they were honest. The fire rose. I waited for pain. I waited for heat. I waited for my body to react. Nothing happened. I opened my eyes because I thought maybe I was already unconscious. The fire was there. I could see it, but it was not touching me. It was around me, close enough to frighten everyone, not close enough to burn me. People shouted. Someone stepped back. Someone cursed. Someone accused me of trickery. My clothes were intact. The ropes loosened. I stepped forward. Silence fell. No one knew what to say. No one had a rule for this. Their system did not include this outcome. They had expected death. They got contradiction. Some people fell to their knees. Some cried. Some ran. Some stared at me like they were seeing something forbidden. I did not preach. I did not shout. I did not attack them with words. I just stood there, alive. Then something even more unexpected happened. My own relatives stepped forward. The ones who had accused me. The ones who had been afraid to speak. They said they believed too. They said what they saw changed everything. That moment shattered the village. And that is where the real danger began. The moment my relatives spoke, the atmosphere changed in a way I had never felt before. It was not relief. It was not joy. It was tension that felt heavier than the fire itself. People did not know where to look anymore. Some stared at the ground. Some stared at the men who had organized everything. Some stared at me like I was no longer human. I knew immediately that surviving the fire did not mean I was safe. In a place like this, humiliation is worse than failure. The leaders had lost control in front of everyone, and when power is embarrassed, it always looks for a new way to reassert itself. One of the older men stepped forward and shouted that what happened proved nothing. He said tricks exist. He said Christians are known for deception. He said this was not from God, and even if it was, it did not change the law. His voice was shaking, not with fear, but with anger. People listened. That scared me more than the fire. I realized then that miracles do not automatically change hearts. They force a decision, and not everyone chooses humility. I was untied, but not freed. Two men stood on each side of me, gripping my arms. They did not hurt me, but their message was clear. I was still under their control. They told everyone to go home. They said this was not finished, and no one argued. As the crowd slowly dispersed, I felt exposed. I felt like the miracle had stripped away the last layer of protection. Before, I was just a secret believer. Now, I was a public problem. They took me to a small building near the edge of the village. It was not a prison, but it was not a home either. I was placed inside alone. The door was closed from the outside. No explanation, no timeline, no water, no comfort. I sat on the floor and tried to understand what just happened. My body was shaking now. Not from fear of death, but from delayed reality. I touched my arms, my chest, my face. No burns, no pain, just disbelief. I prayed out loud for the first time in my life. Not quietly, not hiding. I thanked God, but I also asked why this was happening. I asked what I was supposed to do next. I asked if surviving meant I had to stay, or if staying would kill me another way. Hours passed. I do not know how many. Time felt strange. Eventually, the door opened. Two men entered. They were not angry. That was worse. They were calm, controlled. They told me I had embarrassed the village. They told me I had endangered peace. They said people were talking, and that talking creates instability. They asked me one question. Would I publicly deny being a Christian? I knew the weight of that question. This was not about belief anymore. It was about restoring order. If I denied it publicly, they could say the fire meant nothing, that I had come back to the truth. The system would be intact. If I refused, they would escalate. I asked if I could leave the village. One man laughed. He said leaving would only spread the story. He said this was bigger than me now. I said no. I said I could not deny what I believed. I said calmly that I was a Christian, and that what happened was between me and God. The room went quiet. One man nodded slowly. He said then there would be consequences. He did not specify. He did not threaten directly. He just said I should prepare myself. That night they did not let me sleep. People came in and out. Some insulted me. Some tried to reason with me. Some tried to scare me with stories of what happens to converts who do not submit. I listened without responding. I felt weak. I felt alone. But I felt resolved. The next morning, my mother came. She did not cry. She did not shout. She looked older than she had the day before. She asked me why I did this to the family. She asked me why I could not keep it private. I told her I never intended this. I told her I never wanted to hurt anyone. She asked if I would take it back to save everyone pain. I could see she wanted me to say yes. I could see she was begging without words. I told her I loved her. I told her I could not lie about what I believed. She left without another word. After that, everything accelerated. I was moved again, this time to a more isolated place. I was told I would stay there until a decision was made. No one explained what that decision involved. I knew enough not to ask. I heard voices outside sometimes. I heard arguments. I heard my name spoken with frustration. I realized the leaders were divided. Some wanted to make an example. Some were afraid of another public failure. Days passed. I was given minimal food, no contact, no information. I prayed constantly. Not dramatic prayers, simple ones, asking for endurance, asking for clarity. Then one night, something unexpected happened. A young man entered quietly. He was someone I recognized, a distant relative. He looked nervous. He told me he believed too. He said what he saw changed him. He said others felt the same but were too afraid to speak. He told me something that made my chest tighten. He said some of the leaders were planning to take me away quietly and deal with me where no one would see. No crowd, no witnesses, no miracle. I asked when. He said soon. That was the first time since the fire that I truly feared death again. Not because I doubted God, but because I understood how this works. Private violence leaves no room for disruption. I prayed harder than ever, not for safety, but for guidance. I knew I could not just wait. Waiting would kill me. The young man said there might be a way. He said some family members wanted to help me leave. He said it would be dangerous. He said if we were caught, it would be worse. I asked him why he would risk this. He said because if God protected me in the fire, then God mattered more than fear. That night, everything depended on timing, and I did not know if God was going to intervene again, or if this time I would have to walk into the unknown with nothing but faith. By the time the young man left, my heart was beating so hard that I thought anyone passing by could hear it. The room felt smaller than before, not because the walls moved, but because time suddenly mattered. Until that moment, everything had been controlled by others. Now I knew something was coming, and knowing made waiting unbearable. I sat on the floor and tried to think clearly. Panic would not help me. Emotion would not save me. I had to be honest with myself. I was weak. I had no plan. I had no power. If God did not act again, this story would end quietly, without fire, without witnesses, without anyone knowing what really happened to me. I prayed slowly, choosing my words carefully. I did not ask for another miracle. I did not ask for fire or signs. I asked for direction. I asked for wisdom. I asked God to show me what to do next, even if it scared me. Hours passed again. I could hear movement outside. Footsteps, low voices, doors opening and closing. Every sound made my body tense. I knew the plan to remove me quietly could happen at any moment. Then, just before dawn, the door opened again. This time it was not one person. It was three. Two men I did not recognize and one I did. An older relative. Someone who had always been careful, quiet, never involved in conflict. Seeing him there confused me more than anything else. They did not speak immediately. They closed the door behind them. One of the unfamiliar men stood near it. The other stayed back. The older relative looked at me with eyes full of conflict. He said my name softly. He said I needed to listen carefully and do exactly what they told me. He said there was no time to explain everything. He told me that some of the leaders wanted me gone before sunrise. Not expelled, not transferred, gone. He said others were afraid of what that would mean if the story ever came out. He said the village was divided, and division makes people unpredictable. Then he said something that changed everything. He said my mother had spoken. I felt my chest tighten. I asked what he meant. He said my mother had gone to several family members during the night. She did not defend my beliefs. She did not argue theology. She said only one thing, that killing her son would stain the family forever. I realized then that courage does not always look like agreement. Sometimes it looks like protection, without approval. The older relative said there was an opening, a small one. He said, if I was moved now, before the leaders reached a final decision, there was a chance I could disappear. Not flee openly, just vanish quietly into another place. He said I would not be allowed to take anything. No phone, no documents, no contact. He said this was not freedom. It was survival. I stood up. My legs felt weak. I asked where we were going. He said I did not need to know yet. He said knowing less was safer. We waited. The man near the door listened. He signaled when the path was clear. We moved quickly, not running, controlled, silent. The air outside felt different. The village looked the same, but it no longer felt like home. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every sound felt amplified. We moved through narrow paths between buildings. We avoided open spaces. At one point, we froze as voices approached. My heart stopped. I expected everything to end right there, but the voices passed. No one noticed us. Eventually, we reached a vehicle parked away from the main road. I had never been inside it before. It belonged to someone outside my immediate family. That alone was risky. They told me to get in and lie down. I did. The door closed. Darkness returned. The engine started. As we drove, I felt a strange mix of fear and guilt. Fear of what lay ahead. Guilt for leaving without saying goodbye. Guilt for putting others at risk. The drive felt endless. I did not know where we were going. I only knew we were leaving the place where I was born, possibly forever. After some time, the vehicle stopped. The door opened. The older relative told me to get out. We were in a remote area, far from the village. He said this was as far as he could go. He gave me simple instructions. He said I needed to walk in a specific direction until I reached a road. He said someone would be waiting later. He said nothing was guaranteed. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said something I will never forget. He said he did not understand my faith. He said he still believed I was wrong. But he said what happened with the fire shook him deeply. He said he could not ignore it. He left before I could respond. I stood there alone, watching the vehicle disappear. The silence was heavy. I had no idea how far I was from danger. I had no idea if someone was following me. I started walking. Every step felt like I was stepping into uncertainty. The ground was uneven. I stumbled more than once. I kept moving. As the sun began to rise, I felt exposed. Daylight made hiding harder. I prayed while walking. I asked God to protect me. I asked him to cover me from those who wanted me silenced. Eventually, I reached the road. It was quiet. No traffic. I waited. Minutes passed. Then longer. Doubt crept in. Had I been misled? Had the plan failed? Was this where everything ended? Then I saw a vehicle approach in the distance. I did not know if it was help or danger. I had to decide quickly. Run or stay. I stayed. The vehicle stopped. A man stepped out. He looked around before speaking. He said my name quietly. I nodded. He told me to get in. As we drove away, he explained little. He said there were others like me. He said networks existed quietly. He said faith spreads even where it is forbidden. We arrived at a small location far from my village. I was given food, water, a place to rest. For the first time since the fire, my body began to relax. But my mind did not. I knew this was not over. I knew my story was already spreading. I knew that surviving once makes you a symbol, and symbols attract attention, both good and dangerous. That night, as I lay awake, I understood something clearly. God had saved me from the fire, but now, he was asking me to trust him in a different way. Not through a public miracle, but through a long road filled with uncertainty, separation, and risk. And I did not know yet that the hardest test was still ahead. I stayed in that place longer than I expected. Days turned into weeks, and weeks felt like a test of patience, more than fear. The people who sheltered me were careful. They did not ask many questions. They did not use names often. They treated faith like something fragile that had to be protected quietly. At first, I thought the danger had passed. I was wrong. Danger does not disappear. It changes shape. I was told that word from the village had traveled faster than I did. Stories had spread. Some were exaggerated. Some were denied. Some were reshaped to protect reputations. But one thing remained consistent. I was alive. And that fact alone made people uncomfortable. The men who had authority back home were under pressure. They had failed publicly. They had allowed a Christian to survive something meant to erase him. That kind of failure does not fade quietly. It demands correction. I learned this when the man who brought me to safety returned one night with a serious look on his face. He sat across from me and spoke slowly, choosing every word. He said people were asking questions about where I was. He said some believed I had been smuggled out. He said others claimed I was hiding nearby. He said my name had become a problem again. I asked if they knew where I was. He said not yet, but he said patience was wearing thin. I felt a familiar weight in my chest. The fire had been sudden. This was slower. This was pressure that tightened day by day. They told me I could not stay there much longer. The place was meant to be temporary. If I stayed, I would put everyone at risk. I understood. I did not argue. I had already learned that faith does not mean clinging to comfort. Another move was planned. This time farther. This time more isolated. I was not told where, only that it would be safer. The night before I left, I barely slept. My thoughts were not dramatic. They were practical. I wondered if this was what the rest of my life would look like. Moving quietly, never settling, always watching. I prayed again, not for answers, but for endurance. The journey took longer than before. Multiple vehicles, long waits, silence. At one point, I was hidden in a space so small that my legs went numb. No one complained. Fear kept everyone disciplined. When we arrived, I was exhausted. The place was remote, fewer people, less movement. That meant safety, but it also meant isolation. I was told I would stay inside most of the time. I was told to avoid attention. I was told not to speak openly about my story. That surprised me. I thought my survival was proof meant to be shared. One of the men explained gently. He said testimony is powerful, but timing matters. He said sometimes God protects you so you can speak later, not immediately. That was hard to accept. Silence felt like hiding, but I obeyed. Days passed slowly. I helped with small tasks. I read the Bible quietly. I prayed. I thought about my family constantly. I wondered how my mother was doing. I wondered if my actions had destroyed her life. Then something happened that reminded me that distance does not erase anger. One afternoon, a visitor arrived unexpectedly. He was not from the immediate circle. His presence made everyone tense. He asked to speak with me privately. The men hesitated, but they agreed to listen nearby. The visitor introduced himself carefully. He said he came with information. He said he did not come as a threat, but as a warning. He told me that some of the leaders from my village had contacted people outside the area. He said they wanted to restore honor. He said they wanted to silence the story completely. I asked what that meant. He did not soften it. He said it meant me. He said they believed killing me now would undo the embarrassment. He said if I disappeared permanently, the story would lose power. He said they were looking. I felt something cold move through me. Not panic, recognition. This was not over. The visitor said something else that surprised me. He said not everyone involved wanted blood. Some were afraid. Some were confused. Some were starting to question things quietly. He said the fire changed more than just my life. It cracked certainty. After he left, the men spoke among themselves in low voices. I did not need to hear everything to understand. My presence was becoming a liability again. That night, I realized something painful. God had protected me publicly once. Now he was allowing me to be hunted quietly. And I had to trust that this too had purpose. A decision was made. I would have to leave the region entirely. This was different from before. This meant crossing boundaries that could not be crossed easily. This meant new risks, new dangers. I asked if this was truly necessary. One man looked at me seriously and said that faith sometimes demands distance before it demands boldness. Preparation began immediately. I was told to memorize information, not carry it. I was told to forget names. I was told to be ready to leave with no warning. During those days, my faith was tested in a different way. Not through fire, through waiting, through silence, through uncertainty. I did not feel strong. I felt small. I felt tired. I wondered if surviving the fire had only delayed the inevitable. Then something happened that shifted everything again. I received word from someone connected to my family. My heart stopped when I heard that. Contact from home was dangerous, but it was also impossible to ignore. The message was short. My mother was ill. I do not know how the news reached me. I do not know who took the risk to send it, but it changed everything. I asked immediately if I could go back. Everyone said no. They said returning would be suicide. They said it would put everyone in danger. I understood, but I could not accept it easily. That night, I argued with God for the first time since the fire. Not angrily, honestly. I asked why protection seemed selective. I asked why obedience meant separation. I asked if faith always costs this much. I did not receive an answer. Not a voice. Not a sign. Just a quiet conviction that I had to keep moving forward. The next day, plans were finalized. I would leave before dawn. As I prepared, a man approached me. He was someone I trusted. He told me quietly that my story was already reaching people far beyond the village. He said whispers were turning into questions. He said questions were turning into doubt. He said some people were secretly reading about Christianity because of what happened to me. That knowledge did not make me proud. It made me cautious. Influence attracts both light and darkness. I left that place before sunrise. Again, as we traveled, I understood something clearly. The miracle in the fire was not the end of my testimony. It was the beginning of a much longer road, one that would demand patience, restraint, and faith without spectacle. And I did not yet know that the next place I would arrive at would test my belief more deeply than the flames ever did. The journey away from that region felt heavier than the others. Before, I was running from immediate danger. Now, I was carrying questions that had no clear answers. I knew leaving was necessary, but necessity does not remove pain. It only explains it. We traveled quietly, changing routes, stopping only when needed. I was not told where we were going until late into the trip. Even then, details were limited. The less I knew, the safer everyone felt. I accepted that. Control had already been taken from me long ago. As the days passed, I noticed something changing inside me. Fear was still there, but it was no longer sharp. It became dull, constant, like a background weight. In its place, responsibility grew. I was no longer just a man trying to survive. I was a Christian whose story was already affecting others. That realization scared me more than threats. We arrived at a city that felt completely different from my village. More people, more noise, more movement. Paradoxically, that made hiding easier. I was placed in a small, shared space where other believers lived quietly. Some were converts like me. Some were locals who had grown up Christian but learned early to stay invisible. No one treated me like a hero. That grounded me. They treated me like someone fragile who needed time to stabilize. At first, I stayed inside. I rested. I ate regularly for the first time in weeks. My body began to recover. My mind did not. News reached us slowly, but it reached us. People from my village had not stopped asking questions. They had not admitted failure. Instead, they reframed the story. They said I had been rescued by outsiders. They said the fire was exaggerated. They said lies spread easily. But denial only works when fear is intact, and fear had cracks now. I learned that some relatives had been questioned repeatedly. Pressure was applied. Loyalty was demanded. The system was trying to seal itself again. One evening, a man from the group asked me to share my story with a few trusted people. Not publicly, not recorded, just spoken. He said there were others who needed to hear it to strengthen their faith. I hesitated. I remembered being told to stay silent, but I also knew silence forever was not obedience. It was avoidance. I agreed. We met in a simple room, no decorations, no ceremony, just people sitting quietly. I spoke calmly. I did not dramatize anything. I told them what happened. I told them about the fear. I told them about the fire. I told them about the escape. Some cried quietly. Some stared at the floor. Some asked questions. No one interrupted. Afterward, one woman stayed behind. She said her brother was secretly Christian. She said he had been beaten before. She said hearing my story gave her courage. That night, I understood why God had not ended my story at the fire. Survival was not the point. Continuation was. But continuation brought new danger. Not long after, a warning came. Someone recognized me in the city. Not openly, not confrontationally, just a look held too long. A name whispered where it should not have been. The leaders did not panic. They reacted with precision. I was moved again, this time across a border. Crossing felt final. It felt like cutting the last visible tie to my old life. I did not know if I would ever return. I did not know if returning would even be possible. In the new place, I was safer physically. Spiritually, I was challenged. Without constant danger, my mind had space to process loss. I missed my mother deeply. I missed familiarity. I missed language. I missed being known without explanation. I questioned myself more in safety than I ever did in danger. That surprised me. I asked God why faith sometimes feels clearer under threat. I asked why peace can feel empty when everything else is gone. During this time, I received another message from home. My mother had recovered slightly. She asked about me. She asked if I was alive. She asked if I was still Christian. Those questions broke something open inside me. I wrote back carefully, not explaining theology, not defending doctrine. I told her I was alive. I told her I loved her. I told her my faith had not destroyed me. It had kept me alive. I do not know how that message was received. I only know it was sent. As weeks passed, something unexpected happened again. People began reaching out quietly. People from other villages, other regions. They had heard fragments, not details, but enough to be curious. I was asked to speak more, carefully, selectively, always with caution. Each time I felt vulnerable. Each time I remembered the fire, not the miracle, the fear before it, the surrender. I did not want to be seen as untouchable. I wanted to be honest. God did not make me fearless. He met me in fear. One night, after a small gathering, a man approached me. He was not emotional. He was direct. He said his cousin had been one of the men who tied me to the post. My heart stopped. He said his cousin had not slept since that day. He said guilt was consuming him. He said he did not understand what happened. He said he wanted to talk to me. Everything in me tensed. This was dangerous. This could be a trap. Or it could be something else. I prayed silently. I asked for discernment. I agreed to meet him. Not immediately. Not alone. When we met, the cousin did not threaten me. He did not accuse me. He looked tired. He said seeing me survive broke something inside him. He said he had followed orders his whole life. He said this time, the order failed. He asked me one question. Who is your God? I answered simply. I said, He is the God who saved me when everyone else gave up on me. That conversation did not end in celebration. It ended in silence. But silence can be the beginning of repentance. Afterward, I realized something important. The danger I feared was still real, but so was the reach of what God had done. My story was no longer just about survival. It was about exposure. Exposure of injustice. Exposure of cruelty. Exposure of faith. And exposure always creates backlash. Soon after, another warning came. Someone from my village had traveled looking for me, not openly, quietly, asking questions, connecting dots. The leaders moved quickly. They told me I had to prepare for relocation again. I was tired. I did not resist. I understood the pattern now. Movement was protection. But something inside me had changed. I was no longer just running. I was choosing obedience repeatedly, even when it cost stability. As I prepared to leave once more, I realized something that frightened me. I was beginning to accept that this might be my life for a long time. Not settling, not returning, just moving, trusting, and speaking when allowed. And I did not yet know that the next confrontation would not involve fire or pursuit, but something much harder to endure. A test of faith without visible danger, where God would feel silent and obedience would feel heavier than fear. The next place I was taken to did not look dangerous. That was the problem. There were no threats, no whispers, no armed men watching from a distance, no urgent warnings. On the surface, everything felt calm, and that calm unsettled me more than chaos ever had. I was placed in a modest apartment shared with 2 other Christians. They had normal routines, work, meals, quiet prayers. No one was hunting them openly. No one was demanding explanations. For the first time since the fire, I woke up without adrenaline in my chest. At first, I thought this was the answer to my prayers. Safety, stability, space to heal. Then the silence started working against me. Without constant danger, my mind had room to replay everything. The fire, the faces, my mother, the escapes. The questions I had pushed aside returned with force. Why me? Why survive? Why keep moving? Why does obedience always feel like loss before it feels like purpose? I prayed daily, but my prayers felt different. They were not desperate anymore. They were searching, and searching can be exhausting. Weeks passed. Nothing happened. No messages. No warnings. No miracles. I felt disconnected from the urgency that once defined my faith. I did not stop believing, but belief felt heavier without pressure to sharpen it. I realized something uncomfortable. Fear had kept my faith focused. Without it, doubt had more space to breathe. I asked myself if I was still faithful when no one was watching, when obedience did not feel heroic, when prayer felt routine instead of urgent. I did not like how long it took to answer that honestly. One evening, I received an unexpected request. A small group wanted me to speak, not about survival, not about the fire, about faith when nothing happens. I almost refused. That topic felt too close, but I agreed. When I stood in front of them, I did not feel strong. I felt exposed. I told them the truth. I told them fear had been easier than silence. I told them danger made God feel close. I told them safety sometimes makes him feel distant. No one judged me. Several nodded. They understood. Afterward, one of the leaders spoke with me privately. He said something that stayed with me. He said that dramatic miracles are not the foundation of faith. They are interruptions. What builds faith is consistency after the interruption ends. That challenged me deeply. I realized then that God was not testing my courage anymore. He was testing my faithfulness. Could I trust him without visible threats? Could I obey without urgency? Could I continue without applause? Days later, another message arrived from home. This one was different. It came through a secure channel. It was brief. Someone close to my family had been questioned again. The pressure had returned. Not violently, strategically. They wanted to know if I was still alive. That question carried weight. Alive meant unresolved. Alive meant the story still existed. I felt the old tension return, but now it mixed with exhaustion. I asked the leaders if this meant I had to move again. They said not yet. They said exposure here was minimal. They said patience was necessary. Patience was harder than escape. During this period, I struggled spiritually more than at any other time. I did not doubt God. I doubted myself. I doubted whether I could endure a life defined by waiting. I asked God for clarity. Not signs, just reassurance. Days passed without response. Then something subtle happened. I noticed that people around me were changing, quietly. One of my roommates began praying differently, more openly. Another started asking deeper questions about forgiveness and identity. Conversations grew heavier, more honest. I realized that even without dramatic events, God was working, just not loudly. Then came the hardest test yet. I received news that my mother wanted to speak to me directly. My heart stopped. This was dangerous. Emotional connections are leverage, but refusing felt impossible. After careful discussion, a secure call was arranged. Limited time. No details exchanged. When I heard her voice, I almost broke. She did not accuse me. She did not argue. She asked if I was safe. I said yes. She asked if I still believed. I said yes. Then she said something I was not prepared for. She said she had been questioned repeatedly. She said she had defended me without defending my faith. She said people suspected she knew where I was. She asked if what happened with the fire was real. I said yes. She was silent for a long time. Then she said she did not understand my God, but she could not deny what she saw. That sentence shifted something inside me. After the call ended, I wept. Not loudly, quietly, like release. But the call also triggered consequences. Within days, another warning arrived. Interest in me had intensified again, not from one place, from multiple directions. People wanted answers. Curiosity was growing. Curiosity can be as dangerous as hatred. The leaders met and decided I could not stay. Again. This time the move would be more permanent. Farther, less contact. I accepted it without argument. Before leaving, I was asked one final question by a leader I respected deeply. He asked if I was willing to continue sharing my testimony quietly, knowing it would always attract attention and risk. I thought carefully before answering. I said yes, not because I felt strong, but because I knew silence would not protect me forever either. As I prepared to leave, I understood something clearly. God had not saved me to preserve my comfort. He saved me to transform lives through consistency, not spectacle. The fire had been loud, this journey was quieter, but both required trust. When I left that place, I did not feel fear, I felt resolve, and I did not yet know that the final chapter of this story would not be about escape or survival, but about standing openly, no longer running, even when danger returned in a new form. I stopped running when I realized that running was no longer protecting anyone. That decision did not come from courage. It came from exhaustion mixed with clarity. I had moved so many times that the pattern itself became obvious. Distance delayed danger, but it did not erase it. Silence reduced attention, but it did not end curiosity. And fear, no matter how carefully managed, always demanded more space. The place I arrived at next was different from all the others. It was not hidden. It was not isolated. It was not temporary. The people there knew exactly who I was and why I was there. They did not promise safety. They promised honesty. They told me clearly that if I stayed, I would be seen. Not publicly advertised, but known. They said attention would come again. They said questions would return. They said risk would follow. They asked me one question before I unpacked anything. They asked if I was willing to stop disappearing. I did not answer immediately. I spent that night awake, thinking about every escape, every closed door, every warning whispered in urgency. I thought about my mother, about the fire, about the people who tied the ropes, about the ones who secretly helped me leave. I thought about how much energy fear had taken from my life. And then I realized something uncomfortable. Fear had kept me alive, but it had also kept me reactive, always responding, always adjusting, always shrinking. Faith, I was learning, was not only about survival. It was about position. Where you choose to stand when running is no longer obedience. The next morning, I answered. I said I would stay. Staying did not mean speaking loudly. It did not mean challenging anyone publicly. It meant not hiding my identity anymore. It meant being a Christian openly in the way I lived, spoke, and chose. At first, nothing dramatic happened. Life settled into routine. Work, prayer, community. People around me knew my story, but they did not treat me like a symbol. They treated me like a man learning to live again. That normalcy felt strange. I kept expecting interruption, and it came. One afternoon, I was told that visitors had arrived asking about me. Not aggressively, calmly, respectfully. That made it more dangerous. I was asked if I wanted to meet them. I did. They were not strangers. They were connected to my past. Not leaders, not family. Men who carried information. Messengers. Observers. They did not threaten me. They asked questions. They asked where I had been. They asked why I stayed Christian after everything. They asked if I regretted the fire. I answered honestly. I told them fear never disappeared. I told them regret did not undo truth. I told them surviving did not make me proud. It made me responsible. They listened quietly. They left without conclusion. Days later, I learned that word had reached my village again. Not as rumor, as confirmation. I was alive. I was visible. I was still Christian. The reaction was mixed. Some were angry. Some were tired. Some were confused. But something had shifted. There was no rush to silence me this time. No immediate threat. No public outrage. That worried me more than violence ever did. Then I received the message I had both feared and hoped for. My mother wanted to see me. Not secretly, not indirectly. She wanted to come herself. The leaders advised caution. They warned me that emotions could be used, that this could reopen danger. I agreed. Carefully, in a neutral place, with others nearby. When she arrived, she looked smaller than I remembered. Not weaker, just worn. She did not cry. She did not accuse me. She sat across from me and studied my face like she was verifying something important. She said she wanted to see if I was still the same son. I said I was. She asked if I was still Christian. I said yes. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said something I never expected to hear. She said the fire never left her mind. She said seeing her son walk out unchanged broke something she had believed her whole life. She said she still did not understand Christianity. She said she was not ready to change. But she said she could no longer deny that God had intervened. She said she had stopped others from speaking against me openly. She said she told them that if they wanted to erase what happened, they would have to erase her memory too. That moment did not convert her, but it reconciled something deeper. After she left, I understood the full weight of what had happened. The miracle was not just survival. It was exposure. Exposure of cruelty. Exposure of fear. Exposure of how fragile control becomes when confronted with something unexplainable. My story continued spreading, not as spectacle, as question. Why did the fire not touch him? Why did he not run forever? Why did he not deny his faith to make life easier? And the answer remained simple. Because God did not save me to disappear. He saved me to remain. That does not mean danger vanished. It means fear lost its authority. I still live carefully. I still choose words wisely. I still understand risk. But I no longer let fear define where I stand. I am a Christian. That truth almost killed me once, and it also kept me alive. If you are listening to this, and you are living in silence out of fear, if you are hiding what you believe because the cost feels too high, if you think obedience will destroy everything you love, I want you to hear this clearly. God does not always remove the fire. Sometimes He walks with you through it. Sometimes He brings you out. And sometimes He asks you to stand after it, even when standing feels harder than running. My story is not about bravery. It is about surrender. And if this testimony moves something inside you, do not ignore it. If this story shocked you, share it so others who are afraid know they are not alone. Leave a comment saying I stand firm in my faith. And subscribe, because there are more stories like this. Stories of Christians who were pushed to the edge and discovered that God was already there waiting.